the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. The latest Food Network sensation talks about his time in the IDF. CNN gets falsely accused, reducing the carbon footprint of Jewish life, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Israeli diplomats narrowly avoided two tragedies in two bomb explosions in South and East Asia. In India, the wife of an Israel Defense Ministry representative fell victim to a car bomb attack, reportedly after dropping off her children at school. She is reportedly in stable condition after having shrapnel removed in surgery, though the Associated Press claims she has partial paralysis in her legs as a result of shrapnel having hit her spine. Israel has blamed Iran for the attack. Reports are often conflicting, but it appears that the bomb may have been placed on her car by someone on a motorcycle and then detonated remotely. Analysts believe she may have realized an attack was underway and tried to exit the car, thus somewhat reducing her injuries. In Thailand, bombs exploded in a house in which an Iranian national was living, which Israeli officials reportedly claim is the accidental early detonation of a planned large-scale attack against Israeli targets. At least 4 Thai citizens were injured in the blast. Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak was in Singapore at the time of the blast in Bangkok and released a statement declaring, "The attempted attack in Bangkok proves once again that Iran and its proxies are continuing to perpetrate terrorism. The recent attacks are yet another example of this." Meantime, a myth about Israel's portrayal in the media spread like wildfire this week. Claims that CNN had fired all its Jewish employees in the Jerusalem bureau and left only Arabs in place swept through blogs and social media. But the claims appear to be entirely untrue, and it's an organization usually known for attacking CNN that exposed the lie. Much of the brouhaha started with this incorrect blog post on the site dreus.info claiming, quote, CNN has fired 4 Israeli Jewish journalists out of a crew of 8 and has retained only Arab journalists. Where until now CNN always sent a Jewish and an Arab journalist to cover information, now there will only be an Arab journalist. Again, that incorrect information was soon to be found reposted by a great many people on Facebook and Twitter. But it's the organization Honest Reporting that showed the information to be incorrect. Honest Reporting is an organization almost always found making claims that anti-Israel bias is going on in the mainstream media, but in this case, it headlined its story, CNN falls victim to internet smear. In fact, Honest Reporting reported, CNN still has 4 Jewish employees in its Jerusalem bureau, which is a majority of the 7 employees there. Only 2 are Arab. And where the blog initially claimed that bureau chief Kevin Flower is also Arab, this appears to be untrue as well. But if Israel does lose some of its sheen in the mainstream media these days, that might in part be because of the loss of one of the Jewish state's most famous advocates. Singer Whitney Houston, who died this week, famously visited Israel in 2003 and referred to the land as her, quote, spiritual home. Houston and husband Bobby Brown had been visiting Israel at the invitation of the Black Hebrews, a religious sect created in the 1960s. Meantime, the Jewish world is apparently creating a great many new religious entities, in what seems to be an effort by Jewish organizations to find a legal loophole out of their pension obligations to current and former employees. In an explosive report in The Forward, Natan Gutman writes that the Jewish federations of at least 4 major cities, Philadelphia, Detroit, Cleveland, and Baltimore, as well as the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee and some smaller organizations, have asked the federal government to recognize them as churches and receive that recognition. This change to church status allows these non-synagogue organizations to avoid certain employment laws, including those requiring insurance to cover shortfalls in their pension plans, as well as those requiring disclosures that allow employees to understand how their pension monies are being managed. In addition to those groups, The Forward reports that another large Jewish federation, the UJC Metro West of New Jersey, is applying for recognition as a church, and wrote in a letter to current and former employees that it is doing so, quote, because of extraordinary financial pressure. Well, if employees of many Jewish organizations across the country have new concerns about their retirement, one program is hoping to address concerns over global warming, with an initiative to get Jewish organizations to reduce their carbon footprint. Rebecca Honig-Friedman reports.
On the eve of Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish New Year for trees, Jewish leaders are gathering here at the 14th Street Y to form a different kind of Jewish covenant, the Jewish Energy Covenant, pledging to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 14% by the year 2014. Organized by the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life, or COJL, which is an initiative of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, or JCPA, the Jewish Energy Covenant campaign is part of a broader, countrywide effort to reduce greenhouse gases by 83% by the year 2050. In an attempt to unite the Jewish community around this effort and environmental issues more generally, COJL is encouraging Jewish leaders and laypeople to sign the Jewish Environmental and Energy Imperative. One of the campaign's founders, Rabbi Steve Gutow of the JCPA, issued a rallying cry for the Jewish community.
This is our moment as Jews, as Americans, to stand up and say, we're going to do our part, we're going to take it seriously, we're going to go home and talk to our families, to our friends, to whomever we live with. We're going to make this happen. We have work to do, and that's why we are here today, and that's why we're going to sign this.
The declaration outlines why environmental and energy conservation issues are of Jewish concern and details steps signers will take toward the immediate goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 14% by September of 2014.
The linkage between 14% and 2014 is that year, the fall of that year, starts our next Shemitah or sabbatical cycle, a time where traditionally we let the land lay fallow to give ourselves and our agriculture a rest and to recognize that we're part of something greater than ourselves because we're part of God's creation.
Aside from the general stewardship of the earth, the security of Israel is another reason that going green should be of Jewish concern, argued Rabbi David Saperstein, a founder of the campaign along with Gutow.
Consider just the impact on Israel of generations of countries whose foreign policies have been manipulated by reliance on Middle Eastern oil into anti-Israel postures, the impact on our security here in the United States. So getting this right for our children and children's children is both a strategic a priority for us who care about Israel and the United States, and it is a moral priority for us who care about the status of the environment for the entire globe.
Global warming is also a concern for advocates of economic justice and women's issues, noted Nancy Kaufman of the National Council of Jewish Women.
As research shows, on a global level, climate change and its economic impact disproportionately affects women, especially those who live in poverty and who bear the primary responsibility of their households.
For more on the Jewish Energy Covenant campaign, watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. Of course, many of the concerns about global warming regard how the phenomenon will affect the lives of those who are still children today. But that doesn't mean today's kids can't have fun. Christian Needon reports on one program bringing more song and dance to Jewish children.
The concert hall at the 92nd Street Y was recently filled with lots of happy singing children and parents, courtesy of a unique Jewish-oriented music program created within 92Y itself. It's called Shababa, and on Friday mornings in the 92Y Art Gallery, parents and nannies bring their young children to sing and dance with program founder Karina Zilberman, who told TJC the philosophy behind her creation.
So Shababa is a community of families with young children that get together to celebrate life. And basically we celebrate life through Shabbat and through Jewish holidays and through holidays in general also. Anything that could bring us as a community together.
Zilberman began doing Shababa 5 years ago in a small area in front of the 92Y box office, and has since taken on Rebecca Singer as a musical partner to play for the program's ever-expanding audience.
So today basically is going to be a kind of playtime. We're going to be interacting with the children, singing with them, dancing with them, bringing out the puppets and playing, but at the same time infusing everything that we do with music and love and Jewish content.
And on this morning, that Jewish content revolved around the Shabbat.
Put your kiddish cups in the air and don't let the grape juice fall on your head. 1, 2, 3, go! The Sabbath candles are burning bright. We light them on Friday night. And we all say the bracha, the blessing, at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Music is everywhere. It's a glue. It's the universal language. And it also provides something that goes beyond words. Because music not always is a song with lyrics, but music is also a sound that frames the spirit and makes people dance.
And there was indeed a lot of dancing. To see more music and fun from the Shababa concert at the 92nd Street Y, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Finally, while kids love sweets, the confections of celebrity chef Ron Ben Israel are generally targeted to an adult crowd. You might recognize Ben Israel as host of Food Network's competition series Sweet Genius, but you might not know about his time in the Israel Defense Forces. Meredith Gansman has that story.
A Ron Ben Israel wedding cake adorned with sumptuous fruit, cascading flowers, and even Swarovski crystals is edible art. In fact, it's hard to imagine eating one of these confectionery masterpieces. But that's just what chef and owner Ron Ben Israel wants you to do.
Art deserves to be in a gallery or museum, and it's usually to look at. I want people to interact with what I do. I want them to eat it and consume it.
Ron Ben Israel is a premier wedding cake baker, designer, and host of his own Food Network show, Sweet Genius.
I read that before cake connoisseur, cake artist, you simply refer to yourself as a baker. Why is that?
We have an expression in Hebrew, En hanachtom me'id al isato, which means the baker does not promote its own blend or its own dough. Other people should talk about you. So, and it's a good lesson, because when I say I'm a baker, it means that I'm connecting to the very base of making a cake.
Ben Israel's cakes are influenced by everything from architecture to nature and flowers to wedding dresses and fabrics. But he prides himself on cakes that are as beautiful on the outside as they taste on the inside.
I would rather make a great tasting cake than a great looking cake. We like to compose the cakes of many layers of cakes and fillings. So when you slice inside, it's such a surprise. You discover colors and textures. Exciting.
Let's try to find the flavor that I don't like.
And he also does kosher cakes. But these flights of fancy do not come cheap.
So the average cake that we do will be priced at $15 per serving. So let's say if we have a celebration for 100, the cake would average $1,500.
And no matter the size of his creation, constructing even the smallest details like sugar flowers is no piece of cake. Each delicate petal is cut, rolled, glued, and positioned.
You have what it takes.
I was worried.
You're not just a pretty face.
Despite his seemingly innate skills, Ben Israel wasn't born a baker. In fact, he began his professional artistry as a ballet dancer.
Born and raised in Israel, Ben Israel enlisted in the Israeli army, during which he began taking ballet classes part-time.
And when I would get a night off the army, I would run to the dance studio and stand next to the girls in pink tutus. Leave my uniforms in the dressing room. It was sort of odd.
After his service, he danced professionally, mainly with the Israel-based Bat Dor Dance Company. But after 15 years, at the age of 35, he was forced to retire. And he's been baking ever since. And when Ben Israel isn't in his studio, you can see him as the host of Food Network's competition series for pastry chefs, Sweet Genius.
First season, I was instructed to be somewhat serious and a little evil. The second season is more like a Chabad, Chassid, dancing in Simchat Torah. It's like fun. It's about the pleasure of baking.
The second season of Sweet Genius premieres on March 15th. And to see how a confectionery artist like Ron Ben Israel has his cake and eats it too, tune into the full broadcast version of The Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. That's all for this week from all of us here at the Jewish Channel. Be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 291, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and now on Comcast Cable in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.